Hi, Lauren.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing okay. We had about 30 or 35 registrations, so I'm just waiting for people to jump on.
Wow, great.
And you guys that are on, you can use your camera. Just please mute yourself during the presentation, and then we'll have questions at the very end.
Hey Lauren.
Hi,
Hi, nice to see you. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Not so bad. Not so bad.
I'm so glad you could join.
Yeah, 6 o'clock is a great time. It's a little bit of rushing, but we can do that.
I'm so proud of you.
I've done calls. I've done calls with Liz at 1 o'clock in the night.
Oh
So
my gosh.
yeah, so I slept for a couple of hours and then I got up, did it in my
Babe,
jammies,
that
but
is
with the
commitment,
camera off,
babe.
nobody sees. Are we the first?
Let's see, I'm going to give it about a minute or two more. But everybody's starting to join kind of at the same time.
Okay, great.
Let's see. And as soon as we get started, if everybody can mute themselves, and then at the end of the presentation, we'll allow questions. You can put in the chat, or you can raise your hand. And I do have a few questions from families that weren't able to attend today that did ask beforehand. And the ones that don't get covered in the presentation, I'll mark and ask those at the end as well.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. It's being recorded, so we can share this with our community afterward as well. So glad each of you could join us today. We have Praxis here, Julia and Kelly, to present the Emerald study. Praxis is a company that focuses on precision medicines, essentially targeting the specific pathways in the brain that cause seizures. So, really excited to hear about. I'm gonna probably completely trash this, but Relutrigine.
You got it right. Close.
Is that close?
Yeah.
And how that might be able to help our community. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you guys. If you are you guys going to share a presentation?
Yeah, I'll share
Let me
and Kelly
know if
will
you have
present.
trouble, and I'll just make you the host. If there's any trouble with you sharing. So floor is yours.
Okay, of course. Yeah, so my name is Julia Chase. I'm the Senior Patient Engagement and Recruitment Specialist at Praxis, as well as the Patient Advocacy Lead for our DEE programs. Been at the company for almost 5 years, so I will pull up my screen. Kelly, just let me know once you can see in presentation mode.
Yes, I can see your slides.
Great.
All right, so hi everyone, my name's Kelly. I'm the Director of Patient Strategy at Praxis. I've been here for about 7 years now. Most importantly, I have a son with a DEE. He's about 16 years old. When he was diagnosed with an SCN2A mutation, I wanted to work in industry and work on treatments for him and other patients that present in a similar fashion. I will say I'm not the only person at Praxis with a child with a DEE. So what that means is that really the patient lived experience is being pulled into our program meetings. on a daily basis, along with the sense of urgency. We know that every day matters for these patients. And at Praxis, we're not operating like a traditional biotech company. We're constantly innovating and trying to figure out how we could make clinical trials more accessible to more families that need this. And one way we've done this is offering a fully decentralized option for our Emerald clinical trial, which means the clinical trial comes to the family's home. There's no need to travel to a study site for any aspect of the trial. And then Praxis is an epilepsy company. So all of these programs are individual epilepsy programs, except one is a movement disorder. So we have two platforms at Praxis. The first is a small molecule platform, and this is where Relutrigine sits. This is the drug we'll be focused on today. And then we also have an antisense oligonucleotide, or ASO platform, and these are gene-specific treatments for different genetic epilepsies. And I know for me, with my son, after trialing multiple anti-seizure medications and really them not having much of an impact at all in reducing his seizures, I really lost a lot of hope that the fourth or fifth would do anything different. But I want to make it really clear that Relutrigine has a completely different mechanism of action than anything else that's currently available. So Relutrigine is in the class of sodium channel blockers, but Relutrigine is a sodium channel modulator. And what that means is it's selective to the hyperactive neuron. So traditional sodium channel blockers, they just block all sodium channels. Relutrigine is selective only to the hyperactive neuron. So very, very different mechanism of action. And I know for many anti-seizure medications, we have to slowly titrate up over a series of weeks or even months to get to a therapeutic level and then assess if it's going to be efficacious or not. With Relutrigine, there is no titration. So the dose that you start at is essentially the dose that you stay at. So caregivers will be able to tell very early on if there's efficacy with Relutrigine. It has a very long half-life, about 5 days. So it only has to be administered once per day. And what this means is the half-life is so long that if a caregiver accidentally forgets to administer the medication that day, it will not even affect the levels. For this trial, it's a liquid formulation, so it can be administered either orally or by G or J tube, however the patient takes medication. And then there's no added sugar, so it's compatible with the keto diet. And just to touch on the different phases of drug development Relutrigine has been trialed in. So we started with a phase 1 study, and this is healthy volunteers, so the safety of Relutrigine can be assessed. Based on the data that came out of this phase 1 study, we were authorized to move to a phase 2 study, and this is in an actual patient population. So our first trial was called the EMBOLD trial. It was a small cohort of SCN2A and SCN8A patients. When we did an early interim analysis of the data coming out of this trial, it was safe and efficacious. We expanded the cohort and started enrolling for cohort 2, which was a much larger trial with SCN2A and SCN8A patients. In parallel, we also started a phase 3 registrational trial called Emerald, and now this is open to broader DEEs. This is the last trial for Relutrigine, and assuming there is positive data and we move to commercialize the drug, there will be several years before, best case scenario, that drug is commercially available for more patients to access before it's approved. So any families that are really interested in trialing Relutrigine, this Emerald trial would be really your last chance for a few years until it would be commercialized. And I want to touch on the data that came out of the EMBOLD study. So if we're looking at the 4 at the top of this graph, this is patients on Relutrigine for 4 months in the double blind. And at this interim analysis, we saw a 46% reduction in seizures. These patients could remain on their anti-seizure medication regimen. So they were already on what they found to be the best possible medications for seizure control. Adding relutrigine on top of that further reduced seizures by 46%. When we did the second interim analysis, so then looking at the 11 at the top of the graph, this is patients on drug for 11 months in the open label extension, and we see a 90% reduction in seizures. And this is really the opposite of what we tend to see with many anti-seizure medications, where there can be a honeymoon period initially, and there's some level of seizure control, and then after a few months, for whatever reason, the drug is just not efficacious anymore. With relutrigine, we have sustained seizure control. And then, Julie, can go back. There were no severe adverse events due to drug, and no patients required a dose reduction of relutrigine for any side effect. And then when we did an interim data analysis just in December of cohort 2, which was a much larger group of 2A and 8A patients, we saw very similar findings from our cohort 1. So looking at all patients on the 4-month mark, we saw a 53% reduction in seizures, and then a 66% increase in motor seizure-free days. All patients were not yet in the open label extension, so we don't have the open label extension data yet to compare it to that 90% seizure reduction. But based on what we're seeing in month 4, with a 53% reduction, we expect to see similar results in the open label for cohort 2. And then one of the scales we utilized in bold is called the CGI. And this is where we're pulling out specific domains that we know is a problem in this patient population. So we looked at disruptive behavior, and this is whatever that disruptive behavior is unique to the child at the baseline screening, so day 1 of the study. We looked at alertness or awareness, communication, and then seizure severity and intensity. So on day 1 of screening, this scale is administered to the caregiver as well as the clinician, and then assessed again at the end of the 4 months in that double blind. And I want to specifically call out alertness. So we saw a 78% improvement in alertness or awareness, according to both the caregiver as well as the clinician. And it further illustrates the unique mechanism of action of relutrigine. Oftentimes with sodium channel blockers, patients can become tired or oversedated, and we're seeing the opposite here. And we did receive breakthrough therapy designation for relutrigine, which means that the data from the trial shows that relutrigine is demonstrating an improved seizure reduction over any other existing therapy available for these patients. So what that means is the drug development timeline is sped up to get relutrigine to more of these patients as quickly as possible. And we're expecting to do the same thing with the EMERALD trial in DEE patients. So relutrigine has a much broader applicability than just sodium channelopathies. So regardless of the root cause of your seizures, whether it's a syndrome diagnosis or a genetic mutation, there is hyperactivation in the sodium channels. So sodium channels, regardless of the root cause of your seizures, is the last step that neurons pass through before a seizure actually occurs. And this is precisely where relutrigine acts. So any neuron that's firing too fast or too often, this is when relutrigine steps in and brings the neuron back to a normal state. And the expectation is then a seizure will not occur. And we trialed relutrigine in a pretty large library of different animal models. So we have our SEN2A and SEN8A mouse model data. I also want to specifically call out SEN1A. So in Dravet syndrome, sodium channel blockers are typically contraindicated. They can worsen seizure severity or frequency, but with relutrigine, we saw the opposite. So there was a reduction in seizures with SEN1A, which further highlights it's a sodium channel modulator, not a sodium channel blocker. And then several other animal models of different genetic epilepsies, and we saw efficacy across the board here. And then I want to touch on the trial design of EMERALD. So we have options for families. If there are families that either live local to a study site or want to be seen in person at a study site, patients can enroll into Emerald in person at the site. Majority of families in Bold and in Emerald, they choose the decentralized trial option. So I'm going to walk through the trial design with the DCT option in mind. So what this means is on the day of screening, there is a physician and a nurse that are both licensed in the patient's home state that travel to the family's home, and the PI at the site joins the visit via telehealth. So all of the scales, the lab work, the exams, the assessment, all of these are conducted in the home. And then for the next 28 days, the caregiver is just filling out a daily electronic seizure diary. At the end of the 28 days, if the patient has had a minimum of 4 motor seizures and all of their labs are within normal range, then the patient is randomized into the study. It's randomized 1-to-1, which means for 16 weeks, half of the patients will be on placebo, half the patients will be on Relutrigine, and there is a study once per month. Again, with the physician and the nurse coming to the family's home, the PI joining via telehealth. Drug is shipped to the home as well. And then at the end of the 16 weeks or 4 months, then patients can roll into what's called the open label extension. And this means there is no more placebo. Every patient is on Relutrigine and the visits become less frequent. At the end of the 32 weeks or the end of this trial, we have another 3 years built into the protocol so that any patient experiencing efficacy on Relutrigine will have the ability to stay on drug until there's another mechanism for them to access it, likely the drug is commercialized. So families don't have to worry if they're seeing benefit on Relutrigine. The child does not need to stop the drug at the end of the trial. You have an extra 3 years built in. And then really to walk you through how this DCT option works. So you are still operating with the PI at the trial site having oversight over the physician and the nurse going to the family's home. So we link it to, it's really the physician and the nurse being the hands of the PI in the home with the patient. And the patient's primary neurologist can be as involved as the caregiver wants them to be. So many families ask that the PI connect with their primary neurologist. If the family requests, all lab work done in the trial, aside from PK studies, but every other lab that's done can be shared with the primary neurologist. And then it's, again, the PI working very closely with the physician and the nurse for all of the home-based assessments and conferring as often as the caregiver wants with the primary neurologist. So with regard to who can participate in Emerald, so anyone with a diagnosis of a DEE, it's a pediatric through adult trial. So at the time of screening, the patient has to be 2 years through 65 years of age. Seizure onset has to have happened by 12 years of age. A minimum of 4 countable motor seizures. And then patients can remain on their anti-seizure medication regimen. There's no cap on the number of ASMs a patient can be on. Only 2 of those ASMs can be true sodium channel blockers. And we make it very easy for any families that are interested in either learning more or having a conversation with the PI at the trial site, or if a family knows they want to move forward and screen for the study. We have a website, resilientstudies.com, and we have a page on Emerald. So there's some data that we just reviewed today. If you're interested, you would answer a few questions on eligibility, and then you would have the ability to schedule a call with a nurse navigator at a time and a day that's convenient for you. It's about a 10 to 15 minute call. You provide some detailed information about your child, for example, age, seizure frequency, current medications. If eligible, the nurse navigator will transfer all of your information to a study site, and the study site, the PI and the study coordinator will reach out to you in a matter of a couple of days. And then that's your opportunity to ask more questions, to review the informed consent, to speak to the primary investigator, or at that time, that's when you can have the primary investigator connect with your child's primary neurologist. So that was it for the slides we wanted to present, but really happy to answer any questions. So anything that was unclear or anything really specific to your own child that you want to ask, we're happy to answer questions in real time. Please feel free to either put it in the chat or just unmute and ask your question, whatever you're most comfortable with.
And I'm going to let some of you guys go first since you're on live. And then I have about 3 questions. Y'all did such a great job that I had about 15 and now only have 3 because you answered all of them in the presentation, which is fantastic. So I'll let you guys go first. And in a few minutes, if there are none, I'll ask mine. Kelly, you know what I think would be helpful? If you guys can just in short, let everybody know what a DEE is.
Sure. So developmental and epileptic encephalopathy. So any of the GRIN mutations would qualify here. So any genetic mutation or syndrome diagnosis, it's really if the patient is having the minimum seizure requirement and then some aspect of developmental delay or developmental regression. I think that's the easiest definition for families to understand.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
We do have one question in the chat. This person is from India, and they are wondering if they can participate in the clinical trials. Her daughter has GRIN 2B.
Yep. So unfortunately, we do not have trial sites in India, and we are not assisting in relocating families like we did for our EMBOLD trial to the US to participate. So if you wanted to relocate and you have the mechanism to do that, you would be able to screen for the study. The other option for families where we do not have regulatory approval or a trial site in that specific country is we have an expanded access program at Praxis. Julia can post the link in the chat. But any patient that has a severe epilepsy, the primary neurologist can submit to Praxis for expanded access or emergency use. And then if it's approved internally at Praxis, we work with the neurologist to help gather regulatory documents and submit in that specific country. We have patients all over the world in our expanded access program right now for Relutrigine. So if your child would qualify for that, you can talk to your neurologist and see if they'd be willing to submit.
There is another question in the chat. Victoria, her son has seizures, but they're not motor seizures. She's wondering if he would still be eligible, and they are located in Austria.
No, so they do have to be, for this trial's purpose, countable motor seizures. So it's basically any seizure type where the caregiver can tell by some movement on the body that a seizure is occurring. For this trial's purpose, the seizure types that do not count under countable motor seizures would be infantile spasms, absent seizures, and myoclonic seizures, because those seizure types can happen so frequently it's very difficult to get an accurate count. We have patients in our EMBOLD and EMERALD trial that have the minimum of 4 motor seizures with those other seizure types I listed. You're still tracking those seizure types. We expect them to decrease. However, you do have to have the minimum of the 4 motor seizures to be eligible for EMERALD.
Okay. Julianne she has 2 questions. When do you expect the trial to roll out in Europe? And is she correct that there are no limitations with respect to either gain of function or loss of function?
Yes, so gain of function or loss of function is irrelevant for the EMERALD trial as long as the patient has a diagnosis of DEE. So a syndrome diagnosis or a specific genetic mutation. And then what was the other question?
She asked also when to expect the trial to roll out in Europe.
We will be updating soon on our trial sites in Europe. We do not have a definitive answer today. Okay. So and right now we have activated sites in the United States and in Brazil where patients can screen and enroll in both of those geographies.
Okay, that catches up the chat for now. Oh, sorry. Nope, one more. Are there any wearables used to assess seizures, or is it the electronic diary the sole assessment tool?
It is the electronic seizure diary that is the sole tool.
Okay, I'm going to jump in. If my child has a bad day and I have to use a rescue med, does that ruin the data for the study?
No. So rescue medication is absolutely allowable, and you are tracking when you administer rescue medication in the e-diary.
Okay, awesome. What if my child gets a common virus or a high fever and their seizures spike because of that? Does that count against the drug performance in the study?
No. So when there's any adverse event that happens in the trial, regardless if it's related to drug or just any kind of other symptom that is outside of baseline for your child, then that data is captured and added. So yes, we know this is frequent with our kids where they get a virus and they definitely have an increase in seizures. So the way it works is the caregiver reports that symptom to the PI at the trial site, and then that is documented as part of what was happening with that patient at that time.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll go ahead and do mine, and unless anybody has one they want to put in the chat. If my child starts doing better, but their seizure count stays the same, does the study consider that a success, or is it only about the seizure numbers?
That's a good question. So our primary endpoint is a reduction in seizures, but we have secondary endpoints that we expect to improve. So that was one of the scales that I shared. So the CGI is a factor. Are there improvements in other symptoms? We're doing a quality of life scale and a sleep scale. So any improvement with our kids is a win in my opinion. So if we see improvements in other comorbidities for those patients, that's not like counted against the family by any means, where I'm not sure if the question is around, would they be able to stay on the drug for those extra 3 years in the expanded access? If the patient is seeing any efficacy or improvement in any symptom and would want to continue on Relutrigine, that would be acceptable.
Awesome. Okay, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
That covers my questions. Britt, are there any more in the chat? Are you good?
I am not seeing any more in the chat right now.
Okay, well, does anybody else have any more questions? We'll give it about 4 more minutes and we can end around 11:30 if that's good for everyone on here. I see one now. What are the most prevalent AEs?
Yeah, so I can share about the Embold trial because Emerald is ongoing. And we actually published this data at AES in December. So it was the most common AE seen in the Embold trial. And what we actually saw is there were higher numbers of AEs in the placebo group over the treated group. And the one AE that was more common in the treated group was some level of sedation. However, what happens is, per protocol, when there's any sedation experienced, the concomitant sodium channel blocker is reduced by 25% because there could likely be too much sodium channel blockade happening. Every time that was seen and the sodium channel blocker was reduced by 25%, the side effect resolved in a matter of days.
Awesome. Thank you.
And then Julia, maybe we can send the poster from AES where it goes into some detail about the side effects over to Lauren, and you can share with your community.
That would be great. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
All right,
Can I
guys.
also ask
Oh,
what
yeah, go ahead, Quinn. Sorry.
sorry, Lauren.
Yeah.
What the differences are, like the main differences between the Embold trial and the Emerald trial? Like, is it mostly that you're including people that have DEE that may not have the SCN8A or 2A mutations or variants, or is there something else that kind of differentiates?
Yeah, that's primarily different. So Embold was SCN2A and SCN8A patients. Patients also had to have a minimum of 8 motor seizures to be eligible for that trial. There was a study visit every 2 weeks versus every 4 weeks, and that's really it for differences. They're very, very similar trials with regard to every other aspect.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Britt, anything else in the chat? Are we good?
Oh, looks like there are 2 more questions. India has a huge population, so why no approved clinical trial or treatment yet for GRIN 2B disorders?
I'm sorry, what can you repeat the question?
Yeah, she's saying that India has a huge population, so she's just wondering why there's no approved clinical trial or treatment yet for GRIN 2B disorders.
Yeah, I mean, it's not feasible to have a trial site and regulatory approval in every country all over the world. So we have a team within Praxis that does feasibility work of where we're going to submit. So India was not selected. I don't really have more information than that.
And then, do you have a sense of the reimbursement prospects?
Meaning when the drug is commercialized?
Yes.
Yeah. No, not today, but we put out publicly that we will be submitting shortly an NDA to the FDA for SCN2A and 8A patients for Relutrigine. There is an internal team at Praxis, the commercial team, that is working through that right now, but I don't have an official update quite yet.
Sorry, Kelly, does that mean that if you only seek approval for SCN2A and SCN8A, and although it's a basket trial where other neurodevelopmental disorders are included as well, that it will be off-label use for those other disorders? And for how long will that situation occur then?
Yeah, so we are seeking a new drug application on the Emerald or on the Embold trial for SCN2A and 8A patients right now. We hope to demonstrate in the Emerald trial that relutrigine is efficacious for Emerald patients as well. And then we would seek to expand the label. Again, that is if it's approved, right? If the new drug application is accepted by the FDA and we see positive data where relutrigine is efficacious for other DEEs, then we would be able to also submit a new drug application for broader DEEs and relutrigine.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
One more question. This person's asking if they were to shift or move from India to Australia or the Netherlands, would they be eligible for clinical trials?
So we will likely have a trial site in Australia in the coming weeks. It's not open as of right now for patients to screen, and we do not have a site in the Netherlands. But yes, any family that wants to relocate, if they have the means to do that to a country where we have regulatory approval, yes, you would be eligible to screen.
Okay, any other questions? Well, we will have this recorded and it will be up for you guys to review. Again, if you have any questions after you watch the video again, please let us know and I can let Julia and Kelly know. And they'll get back with me. So thank y'all so much for being here, Kelly and Julia. That was a wonderful presentation. And I hope to start getting some of our community signed up for the trial.
Great. Thank you so much for everyone's time.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.